Welcome to How to Create a Digital Product That Customers Love. Before we get started with the recording of the event, if you could hit that subscribe button, that would be awesome. And also we have the timestamps in the description, so if you want to jump straight to a section, feel free to use those. Without further ado, let's jump into how to create a digital product that customers love.
Hey everyone. Matt at High Yield here. I guess fundamentally I've been a developer for most of my career, starting at 2001 as a software developer, but over kind of working in agency and then moving into kind of startup world, I've really started to appreciate more user-centered design, but also kind of thinking about things from a product point of view, and that's really what's kind of inspiring me now in working in the clients that we're working with, is making them kind of product centered in what they're doing with their technology. And that's me.
Hi everyone, my name's Joe Leech. I suppose a veteran these days, as I started to get this grey beard, which you can probably see here. So about 15, 16 years I've been working in digital product. So I've worked with people like eBay. I helped launch the redesign of Trainline in 2010. We relaunched with Marriott in 2014. And these days I spend a lot of my time coaching founders to get startups off the ground. Founders when they're in a scale-up world, to kind of help spend that Series A funding and to hire a team and put processes in place, as well as working with large enterprises to help guide them to be more customer focused and more innovation led. That's what I do these days.
Cool. Me and Joe are going to have a conversation, and we're going to kind of roughly structure it around these 5 key areas. So we want to cover off user-centered design first, and then we're going to speak a little bit about validating your idea, and then into what goes into your MVP, and then getting the tech right, and then what actually happens after you launch, because you put all this hard work in to get into the stage of launching, and then actually what are the next steps. So let's kick off with the importance of the user. And I think for me personally, I really kind of the penny dropped for me when I was working in digital agencies as a tech lead, and we worked with a few clients. And one in particular came to us with an idea for a kind of a clinical management system for patients with long-term health conditions. And I and the tech team, we put this product together. We got it to a point of launch, and then I was actually lucky enough to be invited to join that company as their CTO. And then when I went over to the company, it was the first time we actually sat down and did some user testing, as it would be now, or usability testing. So I actually observed some people using the platform that we kind of thought we'd done a really good job on and got a perfect job. And I was just kind of horrified that there was just basic things that they didn't know how to use, and there was kind of terminology that we'd use that confused them, and it was all of these things that made me just realize that we needed to include the user in the design process. So that was about 2010, and that was kind of the first point where I really strongly started considering user-centered design, and adding that into kind of the development process. I mean, Joe, you've worked in this industry for a long time. You must have seen numerous cases of this.
Well, I mean, it's got a lot better, obviously, because I think people are aware of the fact they've got to put the user at the center of what they do, and they at least know that that's something they should do. I think the challenge comes with a lot of startups is they don't quite know how to do that. And, I've got stories from, for example, when I led the redesign of Trainline in 2010. I remember the lead product director there coming to me and saying, look, to be honest, the current version of the Trainline, you could hit it with a big stick and it would be better than it is now. We need to improve it. And the reality is that's what they came to say, is we need to make this thing better, and we need to make it more, generate more money. Reality is what that means is you've got to make it fit for your users and what they need and what they're trying to do. And for a lot of organizations, that penny dropped around that time. And now I think basically it's table stakes. If you're not putting the user at the center of what you're doing in your startup, you're going to fail. You're going to, because everybody else is. And it's dangerous if you don't, effectively, in this day and age, really. And I can't think of many startups that don't don't try and don't have to do it, really, because it's like you said, it's the fast route to failure. If you haven't tested it with your audience, then how can you be sure they're going to be able to use it or like it or buy it or all those important things?
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think it's a fundamental now, and I think people are baking it into their processes quite rightly. So if you're not doing it, then you really should be doing it. I think that was just why we wanted to cover it off right at the start, making sure.
It's a risk factor thing. If you're not, it's eliminating a little bit of that risk, because if you're a startup founder, you're putting your time, your money, your effort behind this thing, and you've got a great idea, and you want to make sure that people are going to use it and buy it. And I think the biggest barrier I see often to founders not doing user-centered design early on is they're too worried that the customers are going to say, no, I don't really like this idea, that they're almost a bit scared that they're going to hear a negative reaction. And so think that, or kind of bury their head a little in the sand and don't. So we'll just do it later. We'll do it after we get our seed fund, or we'll do it at some point later on. And the reality is the earlier you do it, the better your product's going to be and the faster you'll grow.
Yeah.
It's never as scary as you think it's going to be. It's like going to the gym. You're like, God, I feel exhausted today. I don't know if I can go to the gym. And then after you go to the gym, you feel great. You feel amazing. And the same's true of any user research you do. It can be quite daunting before you do it. But afterwards, even if they completely destroy your product, V001 of your product, you know what you've got to do. You feel empowered to make those changes later on. So it could be a really empowering thing for a founder, not something that should be seen as being a kind of a barrier or something to be scared about.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there was a really good comment that came up in the chat there. But it's not just a founder thing or a startup thing. I think if you're creating any product or service, anything that users are going to be using or consuming, then you need to take that approach. And I guess there's some basic, even you could do some very basic assessments using things like user interviews, for example. They're a really good way of structuring conversations to figure out if you're actually providing something for a user that they need, essentially. There was a really good book that got pointed out to me a number of years back, which was the Mum Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, for kind of just
apologies to all mums out there, by the way.
Yes,
I really don't like I really don't like the title to this book, but I like the concept.
Yes, that has definitely come up before. It's a good book, but the title is not the best. But that does give you a good kind of basis of how to structure your conversations, because you obviously don't want to be asking people if, do you think my product's good, or do you think this product is a good place?
Questions.
Because they will just say, yeah, it's great. People are polite; they don't want to offend you. So I think taking that into consideration is a good step.
Well, I guess it's also about doing the right research at the right time as well. So it's that idea that, when you're coming up with your idea for a new product, you've got an idea, that light bulb moments happen somewhere in the organization. Is the right kind of research at the right time? And your right interviews are great at the start there. And it's kind of mostly classed as discovery research, that idea that you're discovering what the problem space is like, and you're really defining what the problems are your users are facing. And it's thinking about it in terms of that. So what problems are our customers facing? What are they using now to deal with these problems? All those elements of defining the problem space is really what you should be looking at first when it comes to that initial research, to understand, where your product sits within the mind and the problem space of your user. I'd always start there, definitely.
So so validating your idea. So that's really talking to the points that you're talking about there, Joe. It's kind of the statistics show that the number one reason, especially startups, fail, or it could just be any product, is there's no need. So there's no market need for what's being created. So what I kind of became aware over the last couple of years of jobs to be done theory, and I know you talk about that a lot. Is that something that you could use in this kind of validating your idea stage to figure out?
So I think jobs to be done is much more in that problem definition phase. So you can use jobs to be done to understand what the problem space is, really. Right. There's a classic diagram that was developed by the UK Design Council. You can probably come across it, Matt, called the double diamond. And it talks about that first element where the first sort of diamond, it's two diamonds side by side. The first diamond is defining the problem. And that, you open it up and then you close it down to understand which problem you're working on. And then the second diamond is then the solution space. Then you're moving to the solution space and validating in that world. And jobs to be done is great at defining the problems, but it's not brilliant at suggesting solutions to that or anything like that. But there's other techniques you probably use. I mean, you must use the design sprints. Have you used design sprints?
We've done some design sprints at High Yield. So I think tackling things in a kind of a structured way like that and following those kind of processes can really help when you're kind of working through an idea and seeing if there really is a kind of a need for it in the market. And some of the other things that we've used at a very early stage to help with that are, there's some services out there where you can do some quite nice market research, for example. So Spark Toro is one that we've used before, where you can get a really good kind of profile of your users and the kind of services and the podcasts they listen to. And it's actually, you can use that information to figure out, I guess, where the need is for what the products you're suggesting and those kind of users go. And then again, you can actually start looking at kind of bringing them into the design process.
Definitely. And I think that key point is, once you've identified the problem you're trying to solve, you then move into that solution space. Well, this is the idea. This is the big idea. We're going to build X that solves problem Y. That's really the way to frame it, isn't it? And I like the way that if you've done that problem definition correctly, you're 50% there to product market fit. You understand what the market's like. You just got to design the product that's going to meet that need, and then that hits you into the solution element of creation. And you can use, we talked about design sprints there, and there's a variety of other things you can use to kind of effectively get to there in terms of idea creation, idea definition, and that's really quite a good one in terms of that. Any experiences you've got in kind of helping figure out solutions, Matt? Any ideas and stuff around that you've worked on?
It is definitely the hard bit. So I think this would all kind of come into a discovery phase for us when we work on projects. And I think some of the exercises that we normally go through would be something like, we always find that empathy mapping is really good for us, because I think, again, bringing it back to user-centered, that I guess the fundamental of user-centered is really that it's, designing with empathy and knowing that about your users. So I think when we're deeply understanding the problems they're having actually helps you, and that's kind of on an emotional level as well as a functional level, that helps you figure out what kind of solution you're going to put in place to help them with that.
Really, it fits in nicely to the design thinking approach that kind of favor. That's a nice way to think about it. And I guess then when you've start to come up with those ideas, it's that idea. And I think that one of the big challenges, again, that both innovation units at enterprises and startups fall into is they fall in love with their solution too early. And they'll come up with a solution and like, this is it. We're going to deliver this thing. And what's interesting is if you define that problem space properly, there could be a number of ways or a number of solutions to solve that particular problem that you've identified. And if you fall in love with your solution too much, that can be a little dangerous, especially early on, because that solution may not then get validated in the market. And that market validation of a solution is really important to you. And it doesn't have to be an MVP yet. We can talk about, minimum viable products later, but it kind of has to be that approach of, I suppose, creating some sort of prototype or lo-fi concept. And I've even seen it done with paper, paper prototypes or clickable prototypes or something like that then you take into further research to say, does this meet your problem that we identified in the discovery research earlier on? Experiences around that, Matt, around kind of that validation research and validation.
So I think you're definitely, prototyping is a good way of doing that. So there's obviously, we're going to go on and talk about kind of what tech to use, but actually technical decisions, I think personally, should be deferred kind of as far as possible down the line, because that's when projects and that's when they get time consuming and money gets
down, don't they? Weighed down too much by tech too early. Sometimes it can be real time sink, money sink.
Exactly. So taking it right back, and it could be really lo-fi, like you say. It could be sketches on a piece of paper. We sometimes, when we do it, we design kind of clickable wireframes as our kind of first step. So it's kind of, you can gauge some interaction from a user if you put it in front of them. And for us as us working with clients, it's quite a time effective way of working. You can quite easily get kind of a user flow together in a clickable wireframe, and then you can put it in front of someone, and you can see how they're interacting with it, and see if it's fulfilling their need within the product, which is kind of quite key.
And you don't have to be kind of a designer in the traditional sense to even be able to put something like that together, do you? There's a lot of tools you can use these days that allow you to create these sketches based on something. You can download your idea to something and see. And I think what's nice about doing it at the clickable prototype stage is you also at that point also hit your first series of, I guess, usability bugs, or your first ideas of what people are going to struggle with, or things you need to focus on later on when you bring that product to market too. So I think lo-fi clickable prototypes is really quite a nice way to do it. And I think it fits with the lo-fi clickable prototype. It works quite well in this world that we're in as well, where everybody's behind a piece of glass, as you can share them with people and talk to them through, a Google Hangout or a Zoom meet or something like that. Just ask them their thoughts on that when they're clicking on their own computer in their own world. So it can work really quite well for people to create something like that. But that validation phase is really key, I think. Yeah. And also at that point, making sure you don't, if you're not getting validation there to the product, is to think, well, have we got the right product here? Do we need to change and pivot at this early stage before we invest any time, money, and effort in making and building the actual thing itself?
Definitely. Emil.
So we've got a question here. So can you name your favorite prototyping tool?
So high yield we use, there's a combination of two that we use. So we use kind of Sketch in the design, and then we use InVision or other Marvel app is another good one, where you can kind of stitch visuals together into a clickable prototype. Yeah. But there's a number out there.
So many. I like Balsamic's a nice one. Balsamic's got it's very, very, very low-fi, and it's perfect for somebody who's never really done design before, because it gives you a whole series of templates to use for this stuff, and it's really lightweight. It's perfect for that founder who's the solo or maybe just two-person founder team to get ideas out quickly. But actually, I edited a book on this stuff. So this is called Designing UX Prototypes. It's a really good book. And it's really helpful in terms of doing a lot of this stuff, in terms of talking about paper prototypes and some of the tools that you can use. So it's a nice book, and I recommend it.
Cool. I think we should move on to shaping your MVP, probably, because for me, this is probably a kind of technology aside, even though I feel, obviously, because I'm a technologist, but technology is important, I still think, but it's technology should be used to facilitate what you want to do within the product. And I think working with, again, a lot of founders, but also kind of even mature kind of product launchers or kind of mature companies launching new products, it's defining really what goes into that first release. And I think people, especially founders, they've got, they've always got the vision, they've got kind of the big ideas, and they want that vision delivered on day one. Mm-hmm. Where in reality, the budgets and the time constraints of doing that don't really live up to that vision or support that vision. So I guess the thing that we've got to do when we're working with them is kind of help them define really what they ship in that V1, that MVP.
Viable product, isn't it? The MVP.
Yeah. That's going to deliver the most amount of value to their users. Because I guess and in that way, users don't really care about features. They just want they just want to use a product or service to get something done for them. Again, I guess when jobs to be done comes in, they're hiring your product to do a job for them. And thinking in those terms can actually quite help frame, I guess, what you would actually include in the first version of MVP. Is that how kind of you've worked with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, the key word for it is minimum. It's minimum viable product, and the challenge you're going to face as a founder is it's going to cost you a lot of time and money and effort to build the fully finished thing, and you'll get there. But the reality is you can't expect to be there immediately, and the biggest delay to getting to market, because you need to get to market quickly, and getting to market quickly so you can do more of that validation. So really that phase one or that MVP is that first set of proper market validation to say, here's what we're thinking, market, what do you think? And it's got to be designed to do that. It's got to be designed to see if you've got to answer one question, will people use it and pay for it? That's the ultimate question it's got to answer. And the best, and this is a great piece of insight that I got from a client of mine that I was working with. The best feedback you can get from an MVP is, this needs to be better, because that tells you you're on the right track. If people are saying this needs to be so much better than it is now, you're going in the right direction. If you get like A shrug, you're not doing the right thing. Okay, a shrug is the worst reaction to an MVP. The best reaction you can get is from people saying, this needs to be better. I wish it did this, or I don't like that button, or this or that. They're picking on the detail of it. That tells you you're going in the right direction with what you're trying to do. So it shouldn't be fully finished. It shouldn't be fully polished. It doesn't need to be. It needs to prove the concept of what you're trying to do, and nothing else in terms of that stuff. Not too perfect.
Yeah, and I guess from kind of a more kind of functional level within a business or a project, how you organize that, how would you, I mean, we've kind of used things like user stories to kind of define as a body of functionality what I guess what the vision might look like, and then it's a case of kind of slicing that in various different ways for what your MVP should look like.
You know, because you shouldn't lose track of, like you say, that final vision. You're completely right, but bringing it back to the kind of core, the kernel of what you're trying to do is what that MVP should be. You should still definitely define that vision, because you need to get a roadmap for how to get there, but you shouldn't rely on that shipping in terms of day one. So yeah, you're right. User stories are a great way to do that. There's lots of ways you can define some of the things you want to build for that first element. And again, prototyping can help you there, really, to make sure you've all got a shared understanding, because the key part of that first MVP is you've got to find somebody to build it and make it for you, really. And a shared prototype can be a much clearer definition of what that thing is going to be than perhaps a user story. It's much more visual and engaging in terms of something like that. Do you use that much? Do you create prototypes, Matt, for MVPs? What your thoughts around that as using it as a tool to plan with a prototype?
Yeah, so we have done in the past. I think it works very well for certain kinds of functionality, and then in other cases we've had the scenario where you put it in front of users and they kind of expect a bit more than what you've actually delivered, because it kind of, sometimes for us it gets into a bit of the scenario where I think our users are so sophisticated these days in that they are used to very polished kind of platforms and systems, that if you kind of offer them something that's not quite at that level, then it kind of jars with them a little.
And it can do, but that, I guess, is feedback in itself. If that's what the jar is, it's that idea of, it's got to have a level of polish, don't get me wrong, but it's that point of, if that's what you're hearing back, the polish isn't right, does that tell you you've onto the right track? If that's what they're identifying with, I really like it, but I really could use this, but I don't like that, it doesn't feel polished, is good, is useful feedback, really. In terms of that, definitely.
Yeah, so but we definitely, I think they very much have a place in the development process, because you really can get some quick wins on just very simple kind of checks of, assumption checks on how you're, even if it's just kind of a user journey that you've mapped out, and does that user journey make sense to a user? And
I think there's that question as well, is that point when you're, as a founder or as a team, starting to build something technically, or getting to that point of creating something, you need to be, especially if you're working with a new tech partner or a CTO or whatever like that, you need to have that shared understanding of what you're building and what you're making. And I think I see a lot of challenges at that point where founders are not tech savvy people, and they come to a tech agency and, they talk things like user stories and this, that, and the other, and they haven't got the ability to leap to that visual of that final solution to understand exactly what they're trying to get. So it's that idea of, if you're engaging with a tech company or anything like that, a prototype can really help you communicate across with your partners about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. I think, I guess everybody's clear on what they're getting, but delivery by user story can be quite dangerous, I think, for somebody who doesn't understand how user stories and agile works. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think a lot can get kind of lost in the agile ceremonies and all of the kind of the processes that go on in that stuff. And actually, I guess what we're fundamentally trying to bring it back to here is kind of building a product that our customers love. So some of that is going to be, I think you can kind of make, there's a certain amount of probably a gut feel on some of this stuff, even though that's, I think obviously a research backing is kind of the best way to go. But there are also some quite good prioritization frameworks that can lay this out for you, even as kind of a non-technical user or a non-expert. Have you kind of, when you've worked with teams, is there a kind of a prioritization technique that you normally kind of use?
Do you know what? Yes, there is. There's one I've been working on for a while, actually. I'm going to draw it out for you here. It's call it the decision diamond, actually. I'm a big fan of diamonds. You might have guessed that today.
Yeah.
I'm just sketching out on a bit of paper. So you have a diamond here, All familiar with those. And you mentioned gut feel, which is a really important factor. So I'm going to put gut feel at the bottom here. You also have user research, which we've talked about. So user insight. You might have some data, and you might have a business idea. And the idea being with the decision diamond, you can sketch it quickly like that, really. And the point being that if it's a good idea, it's going to have more than one point on the diamond. Okay, if you've gut feel, this feels like a good idea. If there's data backing it up, if there's 2 points on that diamond, great. That gives you good insight that this is probably a good idea. Okay.
Yeah.
If you've got gut feel, you've got data, and you've got user insight, that's 3 points on the diamond, then hey, you should really do this. If there's business there, there's data, there's gut feel, and there's user insight, if you've got all 4 points on that diamond, go for it. Okay. And this is the simple technique that I use to prioritize, because if you've just got 1 point, if you've just got gut feel, that tells you you're not ready to move to the next phase of implementing it. If you've just got user data, or you've got data, you've just got insight, or you've got a business idea, you're not ready to move to that next phase. You need to get at least one more point, ideally 3 in total, to move forward. If you've got all 4, you're golden and you should go. But this is the one I use to work the best. It's the simplest approach to kind of really get this. I call it decision diamond. So, and it works pretty well for me and the clients I work with.
I really like that, because it is, so there's a lot out there, there's things like the Kano model and other kind of techniques like that, but you have to be kind of a product owner to understand, to actually use it.
Yeah.
So I really like the simplicity of that. And I think that's one, but I'll definitely be trying on some of the projects we're working on. If we're talking about shaping the MVP and what that should look like. So we kind of got some ways for making decisions on those, what features and functionality goes into our product. We've got some data to back that up. I guess are there different approaches you can take to then shaping that product? Because I've heard people talk about kind of taking like a very like a low horizontal slice of those features. So you're kind of building everything end to end across the product, but you're probably not doing it in kind of you're kind of spreading your resources across the whole journey of that product. And then you can actually also take a different approach where I guess you're doing kind of a vertical slice of those features, where you're kind of building out a narrow kind of funnel, but doing it very well. Is the kind of, does that?
I don't think there's a perfect one. It might depend on what you're trying to do. I think there's no perfect approach, but I think both of those two can work depending on what it is you're trying to build. I favor typically the vertical works better, because that's really you've got to find that vertical that's the core of what you do. And you can kind of use smoke and mirrors to fill in the gaps of it as well. So I think one of the other big challenges and mistakes that teams often make is they build too much tech too early. They build quite complicated back-end systems when the reality is they don't need to do that. It can look like it does a thing, but it actually could be, humans behind it to kind of do that. I mean, you call that, what did you call it? You called that a concierge approach before, didn't you, Matt?
Yeah.
Is that approach?
No, definitely. So I think, I'm a big advocate of not letting technology steer you in a product decision. So I think when we're working with clients, we go through the process with them to kind of define what their product is, and kind of do the research, define what their product is, define what they should ship in that V1. But actually, we don't really start thinking too much about technology until we figure out what they want to ship in that V1, because we want to choose the best technology, the most suitable technology for that. And actually, sometimes that's no technology at all. That's actually you're concierging a process that effectively means that it looks to the end user as if you've got kind of an automation system going on. So maybe there's an algorithm that they think is matching them for a job or something like that. But actually, in the background, there's someone manually doing that matching process. And that can actually, for an early stage product, that can work really well, because actually, in being a human process, you can really refine it to the point where when you come to build some technology around it, you've got some really good guide points to start with.
I think you're right. That idea, if you're building a machine learning or AI or any automations in V1, you're probably doing it. You're too ahead of the game. You don't really know what you should be doing. And you hear complaints like, but will it scale? Well, no, of course it won't scale, but if you're V1, you're not going to get many users. If you get 10, 15, 20 users, you're doing well. If you get 100, wow, that's a great problem to have. That tells you product market fit and you've got to sort it out. It's never a problem that you've got too many users. If you've got too many users, that's a good thing. Yeah, I mean, yes, you've got to struggle to meet the demand for that if it's a concierge-based approach, but that's a better problem to have than most of the time, which we see with many V1s, is, you know, you don't get that many users at all. That's the biggest problem many, you know, initial digital products face, is they don't have that many users to really get the most out of that initial trial. That's a big weakness. So you're never going to hit the point where, you know, you're going to struggle to do a concierge thing. And if you do, great. That tells you a lot.
Well, exactly, because that gives you the triggering point to go, you know, actually we should build some technology around this. So
completely.
I think we've kind of covered a lot around kind of what, you know, shaping your MVP and kind of tips and techniques for that. Emil, did we have any questions before kind of we move on to tech?
Yeah, you can move on to tech. There was one quick one. I can't remember if you got it, but your best methods for gaining user feedback. Just a quick selection was one.
I'm going to say the classic, it depends, doesn't it, really? It depends what type of feedback you're trying to get. So I favour the conversation initially. As many conversations as you can have with people, the better, because you don't really know what you're going to ask people. Again, if you start to use a survey, you're hiding a little bit from your users, and you think, oh, we want the data, we want numbers. You're never going to get numbers from a survey. The best thing to do is to speak to people about using your product, watching them do it. So I always favour an interview or a conversation over anything that's automated. If you need something automated, it tells you you've got lots of users, and that's a different problem to this.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. I think I guess from my looking at, again, from kind of a more technological standpoint, one that I've really enjoyed over the years has been kind of usability feedback. So actually kind of observing people using your product. From that perspective, that's kind of, we've gained a lot of insights of, you know, things that were clearly not, you pick up common themes even after maybe a handful of people have been through your product. You'll pick up some common themes that you've just got wrong, and it's kind of, it just shows it up very clearly.
But I guess it depends on that goal, isn't it? If it depends what you choose the research technique depending on the goal of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get, is this button the right color? Do they understand this widget? Can they use, they're going through the mechanics of your product, then usability testing is great. If you're trying to understand, you know, do they like it? Is it something they pay for? Then there's different techniques you can use. Now, I'll drop something in the chat in a minute, but I've got kind of a nice matrix of the research techniques you should use depending on the problem you're trying to solve. So it's never as simple as just use this technique, it's great all the time, because it never is. It's this idea that you need to choose the right research approach and technique based on the problem you're trying to solve. So, for example, I use, with a lot of the scale-ups that I work with, we use Hotjar quite a lot. Hotjar gives you live recordings of people using your product day to day, and you can also do intercepts and chat to them about that stuff. What's great for a scale-up, because they've got thousands of users, and it gives them scale in terms of the feedback that they get. If you're a startup and you've got 10 users, speak to those 10 users on the phone or on Zoom. That's going to be much more beneficial to you in terms of what you learn than asking them a survey on, you know, SurveyMonkey or something like that, because you're hiding at that point from the difficult questions about, really, you know, how can we make this better, or all those sorts of things as well. So always talk to your customers, always talk to your users. Don't hide behind a survey.
Cool. Yes, so getting the tech right is important. Definitely is important. I think I've been in the situation in the past where actually it's been too fundamental to the product. So I guess kind of technologists have got a bit of a habit of kind of leading down a technology path when actually you should really bring it always back to the user and the product that you're trying to build for that user. I mean, I've had a scenario where I was working in a startup, and I was CTO in that startup, and I was kind of asked by one of the board members, you know, can we build? I think our next kind of feature needs to be done in blockchain, which was, this is serious, serious question, because they'd heard from an investor friend that there was lots of investment going on in blockchain at that point. So that's kind of a criminal way to be using technology based on that. So I guess fundamentally, when we're talking about tech,
I don't work with blockchain startups. It's an absolute refusal from me. You lead with, we are a blockchain start. No. You're not.
It's a red flag.
Ever is. It's a massive red flag. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a funny conversation, but I ended up laughing off, and we didn't do blockchain.
But I think what that shows is that a little bit of tech knowledge can be a little bit dangerous. And I think the biggest tech mistake I've seen with startups in terms of building it is, like you say, it's just going too tech too early. And I don't mean this in any way disparagingly to CTOs. Some of my best friends are CTOs, but that problem that you're going to face with that CTO will take you in a particular direction. And I found that certain CTOs who've got many years of experience, for example, working in the city, are like, oh, we've got to build this in Java or .NET. If the CTO comes to you with a technology in mind, rather than trying to understand the problem to figure out what the technology should be, big warning light for you, okay?
Yeah.
You should never lead with a technology. You should always lead with the problem and choose the most appropriate technology to solve that problem. That technology might not be technology at all. It might be, concierge or something in the background. But if you're leading and saying things like, oh, we are a .NET blockchain focused startup, you ain't going to succeed, because that's not how customers buy things. Unless your product is for other tech people, which it might be, you should never lead like that. You should never go, well, we're a, Ruby on Rails based ML machine learning startup, because you're not, Don't get me wrong, with investors, but if that's your lead in terms of how you're trying to attract customers, you're never going to work. It's never going to be the thing. You need to fall in love with the problem of what you're trying to solve, not fall in love with the solution. Fall in love with the problem that your users are facing, and you're going to get there. If you fall in love with the solution, it's going to be very, very difficult if that solution doesn't work, and it probably won't in V1.
Yeah, and it's completely right. Just picking a technology actually forces you into some product decisions that you didn't need to make. I think the fact is also, at the moment, kind of the landscape where it is, there's so much choice in technology. There's things, so there's a low code and no code movement at the moment. So there's so many great platforms out there, low code and no code platforms, things like Bubble, Webflow, where you can actually, you can make a very good looking MVP on those platforms. They do,
all kinds of things, can't you, quite quickly without the need of a developer or a technical person to help you get there.
Yeah, exactly. So we did an interview with a startup recently called Omnipresent, who have just raised 11 million round, but their initial concept they did in Stacker, which is a low code platform or no code platform. They got it out there, they got it in front of their users, and they got feedback. They ended up re-platforming it, but they kind of learned so much from that approach that when they did re-platform it, they knew with some certainty that the money they were spending on that re-platforming exercise was going to be well spent.
I love that. It's really, I think for me, it's a big warning sign, is that if there's too much tech going on too early, it's dangerous, really. And I think you can get blinded by it. So I think the low code, no code stuff's great. And I've used it quite a lot in terms of building and creating things for the teams I've worked with. And it really is a great way of doing it in terms of that stuff. And maybe while we're talking about tech as well, I know you're slightly biased here, Matt, but it's that question of, do you hire a developer or partner with a CTO, or do you partner with an agency? Be an interesting question to figure out and think about that maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, so I think, I guess my feeling at a very early stage is, I think it can depend on the kind of product that you want to develop. So I think if it's a highly technical product, something in an AI space or something like that, but actually having a technical founder on board to begin with is actually a real benefit. But I think there's a lot of scenarios where you've got kind of more typical web-based platforms that are kind of managing processes, or not doing anything completely revolutionary, actually pairing with an agency, or kind of getting that tech support from a third party to begin with is actually a really good approach.
Definitely, I agree. And I think it minimizes risk a bit, because the thing you get if you hire somebody, like if you just hire a developer to work on your product, you've got to manage that developer. You've got to tell them what to do. You've got to help support and work with them. But if you hire an agency, you get a more of a rounded package in terms of helping you program it, and think about the program of release work and how that's going to work as well. So you get a much more rounded approach from hiring an agency. So and again, I know obviously I'm here on a high yield event, but even so, I still make that recommendation that people should work with a partner agency. If they're struggling to think about hiring a developer versus hiring a partner, I'd almost certainly go with a partner, because you'll get there quicker, you'll get a better product at the end of it. Maybe it'll be more expensive, but again, it depends really what the value of where you see time versus money in terms of where you are with your startup. So I'm with you. I definitely think partnering is the way forward.
No, I think it's a good approach, and actually kind of just bringing it back to the technology on offer. I mean, you can still partner with an agency and go with a no code or low code platform, and
Absolutely.
actually some of those platforms, to be honest with you, you do need a developer to kind of create that product in those platforms, because you need a certain level of technical ability to be
Yeah.
able to do that. And there's actually, I think there's also there's a really good balance to be struck as well, because you can actually, with the way that some of these low code or no code platforms work, you can actually kind of have a hybrid approach. So you can actually do some of your technology, you could do it as so some of the stuff that you can't really do with those no code or low code platforms, you do bespoke, and you do that kind of, with software development. But actually, if you're looking across the whole user journey, you might have the onboarding part done on something like a type form or something like that, and keep it, in a third party service. But then the data from that type form goes into your bespoke software, or the thing that you've got kind of your intellectual property invested in, and you do that as a bespoke app, and then it can kind of hand off to something else for reporting. So actually, chaining these bits of software together is actually, or chaining these different platforms and approaches together, can be a really viable way of building your MVP.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to think about it, actually. I like that a lot. So rather than just going, well, this platform doesn't do, on board, using the best bits and chaining them together with a little bit of, concierge bit of you in the background can really, really help you to get there a bit quicker. Because I think, the key back to this, bringing it back to the point again, digital product that customers love, you want to get it out to the market as soon as you can to figure out what they love about it and what you need to improve. And so using a no-code platform should get you to market a little bit quicker and give you those answers about, well, what do they love about this? What do we need to improve about this? Getting to market quicker is the biggest, fastest route to success for you. Maybe you'll get something out there and it won't be great, but again, you can iterate on it and improve on it when you're there. If you're spending 6 months to a year before you ship anything, that's dangerous, because you don't know what or if your product's going to be successful at the end of it. The only way you know is when you put something out into the market. So you need to get out there quickly. And these no-code platforms, or working with a partner like yourselves, can really get you out there faster to see if this is going to work or not. And if it's going to work, what do we need to improve? But yeah, I'm very much a fan of getting out there quickly, making the market and having that conversation with the market to say, is this a good idea or not, really? And see where that takes you.
Yeah, no, again, I think that's a really sensible way of tackling it, and I think there's also an argument probably when you're developing with these low code or no code platforms. I think there's less of an argument, more of a consideration to have, that sometimes they won't be able to do exactly what you need them to do. Sometimes they are quite restrictive, and actually, in some cases that's fine, because you're just gonna you kind of appreciate that it's not quite where it needs to be, but you're getting it out there quick and it's going in front of users, so that's fine. There probably will be other cases where you might try and bend and mold these platforms to do something they're not quite intended for, and that might actually have an adverse effect, and create a scenario where it's just completely turning users off. And in that scenario, you probably should have gone for something bespoke up front. So it's a balance, and I think having someone with a technical mindset can help.
You get it out there, and as soon as you get it out there, people say that to you, you've got to do it. I guess it's that question of getting out quickly. And I've seen a question there about scalability as well. This is always the biggest thing, and this comes from the CTO. It's not scalable to do it that way. Well, no, of course it's not. But that's not the point. Is you're not building scalability now. You're building a product that customers love. Okay, scalability is a different problem for a different. Obviously, future you and your future team have got to deal with that. But that's a great problem to have. If you get 1,000 people saying, we want to use this now, and it's not scalable, that tells you you've got a product that customers love, okay? You don't build scalability in from the start because you just don't know. It's not worth the investment initially to build scalability in there until you're on the right track. You've got that product market fit. Scalability is a secondary element to what you're trying to do. I mean, obviously think about it, but don't prioritize it over the fact of getting something out there to get feedback, to see what people love and what they don't love.
No, I completely agree. I think I would classify it under the same kind of grouping as kind of picking your technology before you thought about your product, because because I've seen it countless times in my career. It's kind of, we call it kind of premature optimization, where you kind of get technical people who just they love building tech, and they're thinking about millions of users, and they go off down a rabbit hole of building a system that can kind of manage that kind of scale. you're never actually going to get to that scale if you don't put out a
No,
product and get some user feedback.
And it comes from, and I'll tell you the type of technical director it comes from, and I'm being quite biased here, is you see a lot of startups coming from CTOs who've made a lot of money in like a bank, they're very professional enterprise grade CTOs. And an enterprise grade CTO is not what you need from a startup. They're very different. Enterprise grade CTOs are all about scalability, uptime, reliability, performance, process, ISO 9001, all of those things, which are not what startups need. You need that when you get to the size of having 100,000 customers, 1 million customers. You need that. But you don't need that at day one. And I think a lot of enterprise grade CTOs coming in with that, that's what I do. That's what a CTO does. And the reality is that's not what a CTO does. A CTO is providing a service to the product, the customer of what they're trying to do. They're not coming in with their own set of requirements to dictate what an MVP or phase one should be. If they are, that should be a warning sign to you as a founder that you're perhaps going in the wrong direction. I mean, by all means, you've got to do that later, but you should not be doing that earlier on. And I love that phrase you used there, premature optimization, because it's true. It's really not what you should be doing early on.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Emil, do we have any questions?
Cool. We've got one from Tony. Can quick and easy deploy static websites be part of the MVP process?
Yes, definitely.
That should be your best MVP, I think. Yeah.
I guess there's definitely an approach where you maybe have not even built any kind of product, and you actually just put up a landing page to gauge some interest on, is this? It could be just used as another technique to validate your market assumptions.
Definitely. But again, it's just that low amount of effort to see if people are interested. You can put a static landing page, spend a few £100 on Facebook to get some users pointing at it to prove and say, hey, we know you've got problem X, here's our solution, sign up to get updates. And if they sign up, that tells you, again, that's a step closer to product market fit.
Yeah. I think let's just cover it off quickly. Obviously, once you launch your product, there's so much to think about. But I think if we could perhaps just give kind of some very quick takeaways on what the next steps might look like, because you've obviously invested a lot of time and effort. You've got to this place where you're putting your product in front of people, starting to get them to use it. What is next?
And I think this is a big, again, I keep talking about mistakes, but I know this is a big challenging one, is that people often we've launched, and right, where are our users then? Where are our customers? They've not put any thought alongside the building. They're just focused on getting the thing out there and don't think about where their customers are going to come from. And again, you're not going to be successful if you haven't got any customers. So alongside that initial launch, you need to be in parallel preparing for where your first 10 customers are coming from, your first 100 customers, your first 1,000 customers. What's your plan for each of those 3 steps? Your first 10 can be friends and family. Your first 100 can be through, an extended network or some Facebook ads. Your first 1,000, where do they come from? But you need steps to know where your first 10, your first 100, and your first 1,000 customers come from. You need that plan at least a month before you launch anything. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
No, I think even myself as kind of a technology background, I've worked in 3 startups, and in each of them, marketing has been kind of fundamental to the success and growth of those startups. And I think again, it's again something that goes by the wayside if you've kind of got a tech-led approach to building your products. If you have more of a product mindset when you're taking a product to market, you have to consider, who's going to buy this product, who your customers are. Let's target them with some marketing. You can't go down, let's just build the tech and make the tech pretty good.
The best marketing and the worst product is going to outshine the best product with the worst marketing every single time. Marketing is the thing you need to spend your time thinking about, really, because again, marketing is what makes success. If you can't attract people to it, you can't prove if it's a success or not. Okay, you need to be really on top of that early on, I think.
Yeah, I think just another consideration for me is kind of back to scaling as well. When you kind of go live, and you kind of may get some more users using your system. Again, it's kind of there's probably 2 parts to scaling. So if you're kind of fortunate enough to get some funding, or you may be bootstrapping it, but some people fund, and then there's actually a scaling almost a scaling overnight or a matter of weeks. And it's not a technology scaling as such, but it's a kind of a people scaling and a team scaling. And some of those things, it's quite interesting to see how kind of cultures can change and stuff like that when you scale at that kind of level. And I guess how, when you've been kind of coaching leaders and stuff, Joe, on in those kind of areas, what are the kind of some top tips or kind of things to avoid maybe that they might kind of miss on their next step of their journey?
Yeah, I think the challenge comes is when if you've launched something early on, you think you've inherited a lot of technical debt, or the ability, we should do this properly now, it's trying to do too much technical polish again too early. And it's that idea that you need to, of course you need to start building out the product properly, but you don't need to be doing it all in one go. It's that idea that you can keep some of the concierge stuff and bit by bit build that product afterwards. Again, secondarily to being too technologically focused is you can spend too much on tech too early. And I think it's a warning sign for many seed investors, really. You've got to show product market fit to people who are investing in from a seed point of view. But if you're spending all of that money on technical debt, they're not interested. They want to make sure you're building a product that people are going to start using a lot more. So you need to be thinking about, alongside, building out that product, how you're going to get more users. You're going to get that first 10,000 users. How is that going to come from seed round? So you've got to be thinking in parallel all of the time, product market. The two should just be moving like that forward all the time in parallel. It should be leading all the time, but the other one's catching up. But there's almost a tension there between the two of them moving forward. That's really where you should be focusing your efforts next, not on doubling down on your tech debt.
Yeah. No, and actually, you kind of product market fit you mentioned there, and I think that's something that some people think it's kind of we get to product market fit at some point in the future. It's kind of I think as soon as it's something that should be kind of intrinsic to the process, and it's you're not it's not kind of you've got market fit or you haven't. It's kind of moving towards a market fit via the feedback and the data that you're getting, I guess.
Absolutely.
But product market fit could be a whole kind of talk in itself, but definitely kind of go and Google product market fit and look for some reading around it, because it's really important. I think it's something that gets missed. So there's something we've been working on at High Yield recently that we're really excited to announce at this event. So we have started our own incubator called Hatch. So it's hatch.highyield.co.uk. So effectively, we're looking to partner with individuals who've got kind of ideas. So we're looking for kind of for founders who want to take their products to market, and we want to kind of be intrinsic on that journey and help support them, because the kind of the skills and experiences that we now have at High Yield, we're full service in, but we've got design elements, product elements, and also the tech. So and also we've got some really great partners that we work with to kind of fill in all the gaps. So we feel that it's time for us to kind of start working in that way with some founders and bring those products to market together. So go and check out hatch.highyield.co.uk and hit register, and we'll keep you up to date with kind of where we're taking Hatch next.